Hello there. I'm going to do a short series of videos on helping your child to apply for university. If you're anything like me, it's got to September and you're beginning to wonder if they're ever going to get round to getting an application in. And this video is particularly for parents whose children perhaps are slightly clueless. If you've got a really motivated son or daughter who know exactly what they want to do, that's fantastic. You can probably just leave them to get on with it. But I think for many children and for many parents that isn't the case. And that's why I'm making this video. So I'm going to talk today about how to help them find the right course and also how to help them narrow down their university choices. And I'll do another couple of videos. I'll do one on going along to open days. I'm planning to do a third one on writing personal statements and another one on the going for interviews. And finally, I'll do something on student loans, and hopefully that will help you. I think today's will probably be the longest video, so I'll get going with it. So if you have got a son or daughter who's really struggling, it might feel really frustrating for you, especially with the clock started ticking now. UCAS is open for applications, and if they really so far haven't got any idea what to do, it can be a very difficult time as a parent to sit with them not really knowing what they're doing. But if you think about it, it's such a huge thing. I looked up the figures and there's actually 50,000 courses available for them as undergraduates, and there's over 300 universities to choose from in the UK. So you can imagine it is an enormous choice, and when you're faced with a choice like that, it can be really difficult to get started. It's really difficult to know where to look. And so I thought it might help if I help you in order that you can help them. So firstly, where can you look? The UCAS website is a great place. You can spend hours on the UCAS website researching courses, and believe me, that's what I did. And sometimes I felt a bit guilty about that and wondered if I was being too much of a pushy parent. But with so much choice, I think it's quite helpful if we actually have a look as well, and we're able to have a well-informed debate with them if they start coming up with ideas as well. And perhaps you might just want to look at some of the courses that they come up with. That might be enough. But if they're really struggling, it can actually help for you to get an idea as well. So don't feel guilty about it. There's other websites that you can look at. For example, the Which website, I've just had a quick glance at that, has some guides and it has a useful table that you can put in the subjects that you're already studying, and it will come up with some suggested courses. So something like that might help. But there's an awful lot of different websites that you can look at. Another useful source of information are The Guardian and The Times. Both do league tables of universities, and they're very different in what they consider to be good universities. They use different markers, such as things like the amount of money allocated per student, what the ratio of student to lecturer is, so you can sort of work out how much time each student's going to get allocated in terms of personal time or in terms of lectures. So they use measures like that. They also use things like student satisfaction, but the two league tables are very different, so it's quite interesting to compare them. Obviously the Times is behind a paywall, but you can just subscribe to the Times for 2 or 3 months while you're looking at the league table. They're broken down into subjects as well, so you can look in quite some detail, and they also give you an idea as to what the grade requirements are as well, and the sort of numbers of students who've gone there with the particular grade requirements. But once you've started to look at courses, it's quite helpful to have a conversation with your son or daughter about what their interests are. And I think as they get to 17 or 18, their real sort of enthusiasms might be beginning to shine through. You need to look at what they're good at doing in terms of their best subjects. But just because they're good at a subject doesn't necessarily mean that they need to do that particular subject at university, and it's quite useful to see where that subject could lead and all the different things that you could do with that particular subject. It doesn't have to be, if you study English, that you need to do English. You can go on and do something like politics, for example. It could be something completely different. And don't be worried either if they would like to do something that there isn't the availability for it at A level. So I'm thinking perhaps they might want to do, say, psychology, but haven't studied that at A level. But there's no reason why they can't do a course that they haven't studied before at A level, because sometimes not all schools actually offer that particular course. And what the universities, they will be aware of that, and they'll be looking for particular skills. So they might be looking for signs that someone's able to analyse, or signs that someone's able to write good essays, and a lot of academic subjects will provide that. And it's really useful once you begin to think about different subjects is have a look at the university course guides. So the universities actually under their courses will list what sort of grades they need and the type of person that they're looking for, and what sort of skills that they're looking for in their ideal candidate. And that will give you a really good idea as to whether or not your son or daughter is the right sort of person that they're looking for. Because what the universities really want is they want someone who's going to be enthusiastic and committed to the course. So they don't want somebody who's really shown no inclination or interest in their particular course. They'll need to see a bit of evidence that they are right for the course. But it's amazing when you really start thinking about it and start delving into the sorts of things your son or daughter has done, how they might actually come up to the mark in terms of what the universities are looking for. So what I'd say is, if they're thinking about an academic subject, they need to think about whether or not it's going to continue to interest them for the 3 or 4 years that they're going to do their degree. So it might be helpful to think outside the box and not just do an academic subject because they've excelled at it at school. But obviously if it's their passion, then go ahead, and even though you don't necessarily know where it will lead to, being at university for 3 or 4 years, learning to write essays, learning to research, learning to say experiment in a lab. Those are all really useful skills that employers are going to be looking for. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a degree that has a specific career following it. Something like an arts degree is absolutely brilliant for helping young people to develop different skills. So an art degree, for example, it just gives people the ability to express themselves and to be so creative, and that's such a wonderful gift for them to have. And even if they never use their art degree in terms of a job, it's still a fantastic opportunity that they've actually had in order to learn how to express themselves, and they'll use that throughout their lives, and it really will make them into this creative person if it's what they're interested in. So please don't let that fear of where they're going to go afterwards affect their subject choice, because they will learn an awful lot going through the process. And although they might not be able to use it directly afterwards, they will use it in many ways in their lives. It's so easy to get pulled into thinking, oh God, what about their career? But a university degree is so much more than just an opening into a specific career. So don't worry, allow them to be the person that they want to be, and those 3 years will really shape and mould them, and it will lead to some wonderful outcomes for them if they're really enthusiastic, committed and excited about that particular course. So if they're sort of thinking that they've got a career in mind, it might even be worth thinking, is this degree course useful for that career? Or even, do they need to do that in order to enter that career? So for example, with journalism, you might think, oh, they should do a journalism course, but perhaps it's just as useful to do an English course where they really learn to write and to express themselves. So it's worth having a think about that. And also, if they're really very keen on a career, have they tested out whether or not that career actually suits them? Have they got some work experience in it? Have they done something with their interests and their hobbies to explore that particular option. So that's sort of useful questions to ask them. And also, if it's a new subject, do they have enough knowledge of that subject to be able to make that choice? And what could they do to give them a little bit more knowledge in that area? So I think that's sort of covered the areas that I wanted to cover initially, thinking about what course to choose. So I'm just going to move on now to think about what university to choose, because as I said earlier, there are 300 universities that they could choose from. And there's some considerations here that you might want to get them to think about. So there's the reputation of the university. Obviously, we've got what we call the Russell Group, which were the pre-1994 universities that people can be a little bit snobby about, because the post-94 universities were what we used to call polytechnics. And so the Russell Group are considered the creme de la creme of universities to go to, although it is worth considering. They do, with the Russell Group universities, they do have their pick of candidates, so it is quite competitive to get in. And it is going to be quite difficult for your son or daughter to get selected for that university if there's no likelihood of them getting the grades, if their predicted grades aren't high enough. Although what I would say is, if it's a stretch target for them, I'd still encourage you to consider one of those universities, because although at the application stage they seem to be very strict about grades, once they've offered a place, there's often wriggle room for your child if they don't quite reach the grades. I've got one of my son's friends who applied for a Russell Group university and didn't get in on application stage because he didn't have high enough grades. He got offered an insurance choice. He didn't get high enough grades for his insurance choice, but when he went back to his original choice university at clearing, they offered him a place on the original course that he'd applied for. So it's amazing what you can do and what kids will get offered actually when it comes down to A-level results day. So if it's a stretch but it's doable, then by all means consider it. But also they need to think about things like, do they want to be on a campus university? Do they want to be close to home? Do they want a more of a town university that doesn't necessarily have a campus? What are their choices? What do they think? You know, do they want to be a long way from home? Do you want them to be a long way from home? Do you want to drive for 5 or 6 hours to the far reaches of the other end of the country to get them there? And you know, have they thought that if you're going to do that, you're not going to do that very often? So once they're up there, they're really on their own. It's worth asking them about those sorts of things. You know, and have a look and see what each course at each university is different. It's not the same course. So they need to look quite closely at the courses and see if the course that they're thinking about has the sorts of slants and things that they actually are interested in, because they do vary very much from university to university. And also, what's the assessment method? So if you've got someone who perhaps is dyslexic, you know, a lot of written assessments might not be terribly helpful for them. They might prefer a degree course where perhaps they're assessed by coursework, where they get a bit more time. So those are some thoughts for you to think about. And what you maybe want to help them do is to think about maybe narrowing down. They can put 5 choices on their UCAS application form. So you maybe want to narrow it down to 7 or 8 or 10, something like that. And if you can get it narrowed down at this point, you've actually got time to get them along to some open days. I'm going to speak in the next video about going along to open days. But what I would say is it's really crucial. You need to do this now. And for the Russell Group universities, it's really, really crucial, because they quite often only do 1 open day. And these open days happen in September and October. And they close to applications to go on the open days a couple of weeks before the open day. So you really, really need to encourage them to get their application in for a particular university if it's a Russell Group one. And if you are interested in particular universities and you're still not sure about the subject, just apply anyway, because you can go along to different subject talks on the day. They're very much there for people to explore. So I'm going to finish there. That's just a little video on thinking about which course and which university. I'm going to record another one on going along to open days. So thanks for being with me. I hope that's helpful. Do feel free to get in touch with me via my Facebook page, which is The Good Enough Mum, and you can get to that by typing fb.me/Good Enough Mums in your search box in Facebook. Thanks very much for listening, and bye for now.